My name is Joel. I'm from American. But I've been working as a long-haul truck driver across Europe for several years now. I've been a long-time listener of your horror stories, especially during my night drives on endless highways. For a long time, I wanted to share my own experience, but I always held back. I kept thinking no one would believe me. But what happened to me? I can still feel it clearly, as if it's happening again, every time I pass a dark forest, or a silent lake, at night. Before I continue, I should say this clearly. I'm not someone who easily believes in ghosts or supernatural things. In our line of work, fatigue is normal. Loneliness is normal. And long driving hours often mess with your mind. So I always tried to find logical explanations for everything. At first, I did exactly that with what happened to me. I blamed tiredness, stress, animals in the forest, or just my imagination. But there came a point where I ran out of excuses. The routes I used to drive across Europe were long and exhausting. Germany, Austria, Czech Republic, Poland, sometimes Slovenia, and even northern Italy. Truck driving in Europe is extremely strict. We have a tachograph system installed in the truck. A driving card is inserted, and it records everything: driving hours, breaks, rest time, everything. Once your limit is reached, you must stop, no matter where you are. Even if it's the middle of a highway, near a forest, or in complete isolation. Overdriving leads to fines, company penalties, and sometimes even license issues. Living inside a truck is strange for outsiders, but normal for us. The cabin has a bed, a small fridge, storage space, heater, basically everything needed to survive on the road for days. Some drivers rest at service stations, some sleep in motels, but I preferred something different. I liked open spaces, and I had a small habit: fishing. Fishing was something I had loved since childhood. Even in India, whenever I got the chance, I would sit quietly near rivers or ponds. In Europe, that hobby became even stronger because there are countless lakes where fishing is allowed with permission. Inside my truck, I always carried 2 fishing rods, hooks, lines, a folding stool, a small camp lamp, a flashlight, and a cooler box with ice. Sometimes I would plan my driving schedule in such a way that when my rest time arrived, I'd be near a quiet lake. I'd park the truck safely, walk a bit into nature, and spend a few hours fishing. It wasn't something I did often, maybe once a month, but every time I did, it completely erased my exhaustion. Just sitting there in silence, casting the line into still water, sometimes cooking a small catch right there. It made everything feel normal again. The incident I'm about to describe happened somewhere between winter ending and spring beginning. The cold was still in the air, but the snow had mostly melted. I was driving a loaded truck from Austria toward Germany. I'm intentionally not naming the exact location. That area was unusual, remote, and even today, I don't want anyone going there out of curiosity. Just understand this much: it was a mountainous region, and off the main road there was a forest area with a lake hidden inside. I had been there twice before. To reach it, I had to park the truck safely on the roadside and walk into the forest. Vehicles couldn't go all the way there. I liked that place because almost no people came there. The water was clean, the shore was rocky, and on the other side there was a dense forest. During the day, it looked beautiful, but at night, it became something else entirely. The silence there wasn't normal. Even the smallest sound of water felt loud in that emptiness. That day I arrived right on schedule according to my tachograph. My rest period was about to start. I pulled the truck slightly off the main road and parked it in a hidden, open spot where it wouldn't be easily noticed. The area felt safe enough for the truck, and more importantly, it gave me access to the forest path. I grabbed my gear: 1 fishing rod, a backup rod, flashlight, bell, bait, a small folding cover, water, and my cooler. The weather was cold, but still manageable. I entered the forest through a narrow trail. The sun was already going down, slipping behind the trees, and the light between the trunks was fading fast. I reached the lake after walking for a while, but something felt different that day. The place was unusually quiet. Not peaceful quiet. This was the kind of silence that feels stuck, like the world itself has stopped paying attention to that area. I set up near the shore where I had fished before. I planted the rod stand firmly into the soft ground and attached a small bell to it so I would hear any movement, even if I was resting. I placed my flashlight so it would shine directly onto the line and the water surface. Everything was normal at first. For about 40 to 45 minutes, nothing unusual happened. The lake stayed still, darkening slowly as evening turned into night. Then the first bite came. The bell rang sharply. I immediately stood up and pulled in a decent-sized fish. Not huge, but good enough. After that, another bite came, then another. It was turning into a good night. I caught 2 fish and placed them in the cooler, releasing one back into the water. For a while, I relaxed. Sitting, sometimes lying down, sometimes watching the lake surface ripple under my flashlight beam. Then I felt it. A strange sensation, like something had moved behind me. It was very faint at first. Just a soft sound, like wet footsteps on damp soil. I froze for a second. I turned my flashlight around quickly. Nothing, just trees, bushes, and darkness. I told myself it was probably an animal. Foxes, deer, or small forest creatures weren't unusual here. I sat back down, but the feeling didn't go away. A few minutes later, I experienced something worse. It felt like someone was leaning very close to me from behind almost, above my shoulder. A cold presence, so close that I could feel a chill on the back of my neck. I jerked up instantly and swept the flashlight everywhere. Again nothing, no movement, no sound. That's when I realized my calm night was over. I stayed alert, and then the bell rang again, but this time, something was wrong. There was sound, yes, but the rod itself didn't move. I stared at it. The bell kept lightly ringing, but the fishing line was completely still. No bending rod tip. No tension. It was as if the sound was coming from somewhere else entirely. I checked everything. The line, the hook, the setup, everything was fine. Then it happened again. The bell rang once more. This time I stood up immediately and focused hard on the rod. Still no movement. That's when I noticed something even stranger, far across the lake. I thought I heard another faint bell sound echo back, like a response, but that made no sense. No one else ever came here at night. No lights, no vehicles, nothing, just darkness and water. I convinced myself it must be an echo, or my mind playing tricks. But deep down, I was no longer sure. After a while, I finally got another strong bite. This time, the rod bent properly. The bell rang sharply, and the line pulled with real force. I grabbed the rod immediately. At first it felt like a big, fish-heavy, resisting, pulling in uneven directions. I started reeling it in slowly, carefully. But something felt off. It wasn't behaving like a fish. There was no natural struggle, just a heavy, dead weight, dragging through water. When it finally came close to the surface, I thought it might be some kind of plant root or debris caught on the hook. But the moment I shined my flashlight on it, my entire body went cold. It wasn't a plant, it was hair. Long, tangled, soaked strands of hair. Not a few strands, this was a full clump, thick and dark, completely waterlogged, like it had been underwater for a very long time. For a few seconds, I just stared at it, trying to process what I was seeing. Then I tried to remove it from the hook. The moment my fingers touched it, a freezing sensation ran through my entire body. It was wet, heavy, and disturbingly real. I immediately pulled my hand back. Something in my mind told me to just throw it back into the water. So I did. The moment the hair hit the lake surface, the water reacted, not like a normal splash. It was as if something beneath the surface had moved in response. A slow disturbance spread outward. Then the bubbles started. Not random bubbles. A line of bubbles forming beneath the surface, moving steadily towards me. At first I told myself it must be gas trapped in mud or something natural from the lake bed. But that thought collapsed quickly. Because the bubbles weren't drifting randomly. They were coming directly toward the shore where I was standing. I stepped back instinctively. The bubbles stopped. Just like that. Still water again. Silence. But now, it wasn't peaceful anymore. It felt like something was aware of me. I stood there for a long time, trying to convince myself It was all natural. Cold night, exhaustion, darkness, reflection, nothing more. I forced myself to relax. I even opened an energy drink and started drinking it slowly, trying to act normal again. But then it started again. That feeling being watched. This time it didn't fade. I turned my flashlight down and noticed something in the soil near the shore. Footprints. At first I thought maybe another person had been here. But the more I looked, the more wrong it became. They weren't normal steps. They circled the area. No clear entry point. No clear exit. Just movement around me. Like something had been pacing, and the shape didn't fully match human steps. Longer impressions. Irregular pressure, as if something had stepped, and slightly dragged. That was the moment I started thinking about leaving. But I didn't, because nothing had fully happened yet. And that hesitation was my mistake. I checked my fishing rod again, cast the line once more. But now, I didn't sit down. I stood, watching the water. Then I saw it. A faint movement beneath the surface. Something rising slightly. Then sinking again. I focused my flashlight. For a split second, I thought I saw a face in the water. Pale, undefined, not fully formed. Just a suggestion of shape. And two dark void-like areas, where eyes should have been. I blinked. It was gone. I told myself it was light distortion. Ripples, reflection, anything logical. But something inside me already knew. That was the moment things changed. After that moment, I forced myself to stay rational. I told myself it was just light playing tricks on the water. Nothing more. I turned back, toward my gear, trying to reset my focus. That's when I noticed something that didn't belong. My cooler. The lid was slightly open. I clearly remembered closing it. A sharp discomfort hit my chest. I walked over and slowly opened it again, shining my flashlight inside. The fish were still there, but now there were thin strands of hair stuck on them. Not many, just a few. But enough that I couldn't ignore it anymore. My breathing changed. I stepped back immediately and closed the cooler. At that point, I started thinking maybe someone was here. A person, playing tricks, or watching me. I raised my voice and shouted into the forest. "Is anyone there?" No response, only silence. Then, from across the lake, I heard something. A faint sound. It wasn't clear words, but it mimicked my tone, like someone repeating the shape of my voice. Without understanding it, my body froze. I didn't move for a moment. That was no echo. It was delayed, and wrong. I made a decision then. I would pack up. No more fishing, no more waiting. I went to grab my rod when the bell suddenly rang violently. This time it wasn't subtle. It was sharp, aggressive, immediate. I grabbed the rod instinctively and pulled. Something was on the line again, but this time it felt different. Not resistance, control. Like something was holding the line from the other side and testing it. Small pulls, then release, then pull again, almost playful. I yanked harder. The line came up slightly, then suddenly snapped free. And at that exact moment, something touched my shoulder. Left shoulder, cold, wet, heavy. I froze completely. I didn't scream immediately. My body just locked. Slowly I turned my head. Flashlight went straight behind me. Nothing, no person, no animal, no movement. But on my jacket, 5 wet fingerprints. Long, uneven, not fully human in proportion. That was the moment I stopped trying to understand it. I started packing immediately. No more hesitation. Just survival instinct. I grabbed everything I could. Ruds, bag, cooler. Even though I wanted to leave the cooler behind, I still took it. I don't know why. Maybe habit. Maybe denial. Then the lake changed again. The water near the center began to shift. Not waves. A recession, like something underneath was pulling it inward. Slowly, the surface dropped slightly in one area. Then a dark line appeared. A long vertical shape rising from below. At first I thought it was wood. But then it kept rising, and rising, until it stopped being natural. It wasn't wood. It was hair. Long, dense, soaked hair. rising just under the surface like a floating mass, attached to something beneath, something that wasn't fully visible. I backed away immediately. My breathing broke. And from deep inside the forest, a cough. Not animal, not natural. A woman-like cough, distant, then silence again. That was enough. I ran, not fast at first, just controlled panic, trying not to fall, trying not to lose direction. But within seconds, the calm thinking completely collapsed. The forest didn't feel the same anymore. The path I came from wasn't clear anymore. The trees looked denser. The ground felt softer, almost damp in places where I remembered dry soil. And the direction, something about it felt off. I kept telling myself I was just disoriented. Darkness does that. Fear does that. But then I realized something worse. There were no familiar markers anymore. No sense of back the way I came. Just forest. Endless, repeating forest. I slowed down slightly, trying to locate the trail again. That's when I heard it, a sound behind me, soft, wet footsteps. Not running. Following. I stopped instantly. The sound stopped too. Complete silence again. I turned my flashlight back sharply. Trees, bushes, shadows, nothing moved. But I didn't move for a few seconds. Then I started walking again. Faster this time. The sound returned immediately, behind me, matching my pace. Every time I stopped it, stopped. Every time I moved it, followed. I didn't look back again. I just kept going forward, forcing my body. Through the trees, branches scratching my arms, gear swinging uncontrollably. At some point, I dropped a fishing rod. It didn't matter anymore. I just kept the bag and cooler. Even that felt stupid now. My thoughts were collapsing into one thing. Get to the truck. Just reach the truck. But the forest didn't cooperate. Paths twisted in ways I didn't remember. The incline felt wrong. Even the spacing between trees felt unnatural, like everything had subtly rearranged itself. At one point, I stopped again to catch my breath. And that's when I felt it clearly. Something was still behind me. Not close enough to see, but close enough to know. Watching, waiting. I forced myself to move again, and finally, after what felt like forever, I saw it. A faint break in the trees. A darker, open space. The direction of the main road. I pushed forward with everything I had left. Branches hit my face, my arms, my chest. But I didn't slow down. Then I stepped out of the forest edge. Gravel ground. Road nearby. And there it was. My truck. Parked exactly where I left it. But something about it didn't feel right. At first I couldn't tell what. Then I saw it. The front windshield had moisture marks, like someone had pressed wet hands against the glass. I walked closer slowly, each step heavier than the last. Then I saw the door. Long wet streaks along the handle, down the side panel. Fresh, very fresh. I froze, because there was no one here before me, and I hadn't seen anyone on the way back. I reached for the key slowly, but I didn't open it immediately. Something inside me hesitated. I walked around the passenger side. More marks. Same pattern. Wet, dragging impressions. As if something had circled the truck. I finally unlocked the door and climbed inside. I locked it immediately behind me. For a few seconds, I just sat there, breathing heavily, trying to convince myself I was safe again. Cabin felt normal, familiar. Bed, storage, dashboard, everything in place. For a brief moment, I almost believed I had imagined everything. Then I started the engine. The vibration filled the cabin. A familiar sound. A grounding sound. But it didn't last. Because when I looked at the rearview mirror, something was wrong. The bunk area looked darker than it should. And in that darkness, I thought I saw something sitting there. Wet still, watching. I turned my head immediately. The bunk was empty. Nothing there. Just my bed, my bags, and the usual shadows of the cabin. But the feeling didn't go away. I moved closer with a flashlight, checking every corner carefully. Nothing still. I couldn't relax. Something had been there a second ago. I was sure of it. I checked the bunk area, properly mattress, edges, storage compartments. Then, I noticed it. A wet stain on the mattress. Not large, but fresh enough to look recent. and right beside it, a single long strand of hair. The same kind I had seen at the lake. My stomach dropped. I stepped back immediately. Now I was no longer trying to explain anything. I was only trying to leave. I sat back in the driver's seat, started the engine again, and prepared to move. That's when the tachograph beeped. A warning tone. A system check message flashed briefly on the screen, too fast to fully read, but it forced my attention. I didn't care anymore. I just wanted to drive. I shifted into gear and pulled onto the road. The forest road was still dark, narrow, and empty on both sides. At first, everything seemed normal. Just engine, noise, and headlights cutting through the night. I tried to calm myself. Maybe it was stress. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe I had overreacted to everything. But then the smell started. A strange odor inside the cabin. Cold water, rotten grass. Something old, something wet. It didn't belong in a sealed truck cabin. I checked the bunk area again through the mirror. Nothing visible. But the smell got stronger. I opened the side window slightly. No change. The smell stayed inside. That's when I looked. Down the cooler. Still in the cabin. I slowly reached for it and closed it tightly. But it was too late. The smell was already spreading. Then, a faint metallic sound. Ting. From the rear bunk area, like a small fishing bell. I froze. My hand went straight to my jacket pocket. The bell was still there. But I heard it again. Ting. This time from the back. Not my pocket. Not my hand. Somewhere inside the truck. I looked in the mirror. Nothing. Then again ting. Slightly louder. Now I started scanning everything while driving. Cabin. Bunk. Floor. Storage. Nothing explained it. Then suddenly, headlights ahead showed a roadside figure. A pale shape on the right shoulder of the road. At first I thought it was a signpost or plastic sheet. But as I got closer, it shifted. It looked almost like a person. Standing still. Too still. I slowed down instinctively, and as I passed, it wasn't a person. Just a reflection illusion from a reflector post and hanging plastic. But my nerves were already broken. Every shadow now felt alive. I kept driving. Faster now. The next service area was still far. Then my phone lit up on its own. No signal, no notification. Just the screen turning on by itself. On the lock screen, the camera app icon briefly flickered, then disappeared. I didn't touch it. I didn't want to, because now I was sure something was inside the truck with me. The road kept going, but my mind wasn't processing it normally anymore. Every small sound in the truck felt amplified. Every vibration felt intentional. Then, I heard it again. A faint dragging sound from the rear bunk area. Like something wet sliding very slowly across the floor. I looked in the mirror. Nothing clearly visible. But I noticed something on the cabin floor near the passenger side. A faint wet streak. It wasn't there before. I kept driving, trying to ignore it. The tachograph beeped again. This time more insistently. A mandatory rest warning. I knew I had no legal choice. If I kept driving, it would cause problems later with the system, the company, everything. But more importantly, I was already struggling to control the vehicle properly. So I did the only thing I could do. I pulled over. The truck stopped on a dark, isolated roadside stretch. No lights, no buildings. Just forest on both sides. Again, the engine was still running, but the silence outside felt heavier than before. I didn't turn it off immediately. I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, breathing, trying to stabilize myself, then knock. On the driver's side door. 2 sharp knocks. I froze instantly. My eyes locked on the window. Nothing outside. No silhouette. No movement. Just darkness. Then again, knock. This time on the passenger side. My body went cold. I didn't move. I didn't answer. Then a third knock came from behind the truck. Harder this time. Metallic, like someone hit the trailer with full force. That broke me. I pushed myself out of the seat and opened the driver door. I stepped down carefully. The air outside felt even colder than before. Too still, too empty. I walked quickly toward the rear of the truck. Nothing, no tire movement, No footprints visible in the dirt. No sign of anything alive. But then, the horn sounded. My truck horn, full blast, long, continuous. I spun around immediately and ran toward the cab. The driver door was now slightly open. The horn was still blaring, as if someone was inside pressing it. Then slam. The door shut violently on its own, not wind, not vibration. Something inside. The horn stopped instantly. Silence returned. I stood frozen for a second. Then I pulled the handle and got back inside fast. Locked everything. My hands were shaking uncontrollably now. And when I looked forward, I saw it, right in front of the truck. A figure, standing close enough that the headlights fully lit it. A woman-shaped form. Long wet hair covering her face completely. Her posture unnatural. Still wrong. Her body looked soaked, like she had been pulled out of deep water. But the worst part was not her appearance. It was the fact that she was just standing there, watching, not reacting to the headlights, not blinking, not moving. I froze. My foot didn't even press the clutch properly for a moment. Then she tilted her head slightly, slow, unnatural, and started moving sideways. Not walking normally, gliding. I reacted instinctively. I put the truck into gear and moved forward. I didn't aim, I just moved. The truck passed her. Position. I refused to look at the mirror immediately. But when I did, she was behind the trailer. And she was moving, running, not like a human. Long, uneven motion. Keeping pace with the truck, I increased speed. My heart was pounding so hard, I could hear it over the engine. Then, the movement stopped. Suddenly, no more shadow behind me, no more pressure. Just empty road again. But I didn't trust it. I kept driving until I saw distant lights ahead. A service area. Real lights. Real cars. Real people. I pulled in without hesitation. Parked, and just stayed there. Holding the steering wheel, breathing heavily. Waiting for my body to understand, I was no longer alone on that road. I stayed in the service area parking lot for a long time. Engine still running at first. Hands still on the steering wheel. Just trying to make sure I wasn't imagining the safety I had reached. Around me there were other trucks, a few parked cars, and distant lights from the station building. Normal life. People walking in and out. Sounds of doors closing. Machines humming. Everything that felt impossible just minutes ago. I didn't move for a while. Eventually, I turned the engine off. The silence inside the cabin changed immediately. Not scary anymore. Just exhausted silence. I sat there trying to process what had happened. I told myself it was over now. That it had to be over. I even stepped out once, walked near the truck, checked the surroundings properly. Nothing unusual, no footprints, no wet marks. No sign of anything following me. That gave me a small amount of relief. I went back into the cabin and tried to breathe normally again. But then I noticed something that made that relief disappear instantly. On the outside of the passenger window, a faint smear, like a wet hand had touched the glass from the outside. I stared at it for a few seconds, then slowly looked around the parking area. People were nearby. Lights were on. Everything looked normal. But that mark, it wasn't there when I arrived. I didn't sleep that night. I just stayed in the cab until morning, watching, waiting. At sunrise, I finally convinced myself to continue the journey. And I did. For days after that, nothing happened again in the way it did that night. No clear sightings, no direct incidents. But something stayed, subtle things. The smell sometimes returned for a second inside the cabin and disappeared. The tachograph would occasionally beep, even when nothing was wrong. And at night, especially near forests or lakes, I started feeling that same pressure again. Like something was nearby, even if I couldn't see it. I stopped going near lakes after that. Completely. Fishing gear stayed untouched in the truck. I never used it again. But there is one thing I still remember clearly. One detail I can't explain even today. Sometimes, when I'm driving alone at night, and the road is completely empty, I hear a very faint sound from the back of the truck. A small metallic ting, like a fishing bell. And every time I hear it, I check my pocket, just to make sure it's still there. It always is. But the sound, sometimes still comes from somewhere else. And that's the part I never managed to explain. Not once.